Hi, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 8 of My Words, Our Journey. Be careful what you wish for. I'm Monty, your host, and I think I said last episode that we had 2 episodes left. Sorry, I lied. This will be the last episode of this journey. It may not be as long as the other episodes, but it does have a lot going on, so I hope you enjoy the conclusion. Let's go with Chapter 28. Dwayne Freeman was playing the grieving fiancé and making the most of his 15 minutes. It was exhausting, but he loved every minute of it. Truth be told, he was upset, but not as upset as a grieving future husband should be after the brutal loss of his future wife and the mother of his future children. Truth be told, he would never tell anyone his little secret. It had been last week when he had realized he was just not ready to settle down and get married. Not cold feet per se, but running feet maybe. Running from Denise. He just didn't think she was the one long term. He was starting to notice each little flaw in her voice, her laugh, skin, the way she walked, choice in her shoes, her food, you name it. And he could find a reason to criticize. But luckily, he had kept it all to himself, all in his head. Now he was so glad because he had not had to be the bad guy. He had wished for a simple way out of his situation, and somewhere out there, his wish was heard and answered. He was grateful for that, but he was not at all happy that she was dead. No, he did love her. He just hadn't thought everything through when he made the wish, hadn't thought about the consequences. Be careful what you wish for, Dwayne thought as he lowered himself into the sedan. It was at that moment that his cell phone rang, indicating that he had a new text. As he read it again. So you think I'm a degenerate, do you? There was a long pause, with neither party texting, as if the next one to text lost. Finally, and you think you get to decide if you play the game or not? Well, it doesn't work that way. Still, Dwayne did not answer. He dared not upset the texter. After a few long minutes, his final text of that day from the killer was, "I will let you know when the game is decided you will play. Until then, enjoy your fame." He was so mad he could have killed someone, anyone, but instead he got back on the road and headed west. He had to calm down, get himself back under control. Seeing Chris would calm his nerves. Dwayne was unnerved by the text. Was it the killer? Was it a copycat? Time would certainly tell. That he knew for sure. There really wasn't time to worry about it. He had a criminal class at the local college he was due to speak at in less than an hour, and then a dinner to raise money for victims of violence, with money going into a fund in Denise's honor. The diner was busy. The killer was not thrilled with having to park at the far end of the lot and walk past all the cars. That meant Chris would most likely be late getting off work. He really had nowhere else to be. He was just waiting. He was getting old, if he had to be honest with himself. The heat and the noise hit him the second he opened the door. There was a line waiting to pay at the register, and the sign said, "Welcome. Seat yourself, please." So annoyed, the killer made his way to a two-top, way in the back corner by the bathrooms, where he waited and waited. Finally, a frayed old woman came swinging by, one hand full of dirty dishes, the other a half-full water decanter. "Hi, honey. Sorry. We've been this way all day. Here's a little cold water to get you started. I'll come back and get the rest of your order shortly." "Rest of my order? I didn't order half a glass of water," the killer screamed in his head. "Can you just send Chris over when you see her, please?" "Oh, darling. Chris quit yesterday. That's partly why we're so busy today. She was so good with customers and so fast, too." "Quit? Where'd she go? Did she get another job?" "I don't know, honey. We weren't that close." And with that, the old woman was off. The killer was so mad when he left, it took him a minute to realize he had her number. He finally calmed down. The game was taking more of a toll than he had expected. Maybe a good night's sleep was needed. But first, after 3 rings, the killer heard her voice, the voice of an angel. Chris was on the other end of the line. The killer was relieved. He was thinking maybe she had given him a bad number. To hear her voice took his stress away. "You quit your job. What's going on? Everything okay?" Chris went on to tell him about the problems her family was having and how they were probably going to have to move in with relatives soon because their dad had lost his job several months back and they just weren't able to recover. The killer listened, but he was only thinking about himself and how this news would affect her mood and his plans for the evening. "I'm so sorry to hear all that. That's a heavy burden for you to be carrying. Would you like some company? We could just walk or something." There was an awkward pause. Finally, he decided to end the silence. It's okay. You don't know me. I'm sure there's others you'd rather be, confiding in. I shouldn't have been, maybe I should have been more sensitive than that. It's okay if I call you sometime, though, maybe? Just check on you, I mean? There was another pause, as if he was the only one left on the line. Then, yes, that'd be okay. You can call me sometime. That'd be nice. Maybe I'll be in a better place, mentally and physically. And then, she was gone. The thoughts he created in his head of how this reunion would be vanished like a thin line of smoke from a match, and he was crushed. She could have been the one. Yeah, it was only a few hours together, but she was special. So nice. And now, he just knew the game had taken her away from him. That place where you know something to be true, even if the whole rest of you fights it. Fights it, hard as you can. Chris was gone. Chris, on the other hand, was sitting at her kitchen table scrolling through her phone. She was usually not the one to lie to boys. In her circle, she was actually known for being blunt with those of the opposite sex. But this one was different. There was something about him that scared her, and she did not want to be on his bad side. So, she had quit a job she liked, made up a story about her family's hardships, just to avoid seeing him again. Had the true crime show she watched with her family finally gotten to her? She wondered briefly. Then her phone rang, and she did not think about the stranger again until she did. The killer would think of Chris almost nonstop for the next several hours. There was no distractions. He tried. How could he find her? No way work would give him the information. He had searched her socials again. Nothing there to give him any hint. It was literally driving to a point he had never been before, and he did not like it. At the moment, he was going through his new friend Dwayne's page, looking for anything he might find interesting on him. He was very active on social media. Not a lot of pictures of him and the dead girl, though, he thought. He should have taken a picture of Chris. He was starting to forget what she looked like, her features. He checked. His friend's request had not been confirmed yet, but he was sure it would be. Why wouldn't it be? Back to D. After not finding anything interesting, he decided to Google his name and look at recent articles. The fellow was certainly staying busy. Dinners, quotes, interviews, interesting takes on the future of policy and the fight against violence against women. This guy was not short of opinions. What he did find interesting was the lack of emotional sentiments in the articles, interviews. Interesting. The killer did not like him one bit. He seemed to really be liking all the attention he was getting. And it was only because of the killer he was getting this 15 minutes at all. And the killer was getting no credit. No one even knew his name. Should he change that? Was that a crazy thought? It was, right? Was it, though? Everyone wanted their time in the spotlight. That time when you were on top. Why not him? And what other opportunity would he have other than now? He studied the man's upcoming events, of which there were many, but the game always finds a way. In only 2 days, in a small town just outside of Tulsa named Broken Arrow, Dwayne would be giving a lecture on violence and the impact it had on those left behind at Northeastern State University, open to the public, doors open at 6 p.m. Broken Arrow sounded lovely. He had been right about the game. It wasn't over. Chapter 29. He was not eating particularly well this trip, but at this point, he was not focusing on his calorie intake, carbs, etc. So, he had found what was supposed to be the best burger joint in Broken Arrow and sat at a table by a window and took in what the day had to offer. He had not stopped thinking about Chris, but he was working on it. When he wasn't, he was thinking about D and the game left to play. The killer really had no idea how the game would finish. It was thrilling and scary at the same time. He had just assumed he would win and go back to the life of lies he'd built in L.A. Why wouldn't he? He was a glass half full kind of guy after all. 2 weeks back to his normal routine, and he'd be fit and back to his old self, if the game had that in the cards for him. If not, would a burger and fries really hurt? He was sitting outside a place called Shaky Jake's, a place that topped several of the best burger lists. He looked up, and for good reason. If he had a chance, he'd have another before he left town. From there, he checked into a small family-owned hotel, walking distance to the college. It was old, but clean, and had everything he needed. He wasn't there for the pool or the tennis courts. He was there for a different kind of game. There was a little over a day until he'd be in the same room with his opponent. In that time, He was confident the game would show him what was expected of him next. Until then, he would watch and wait and prepare himself. Staying cooped up in the room is what his body was telling him he needed, but his head told him he needed to be out amongst the people, the town, and its activities. There was a sign or something just waiting for him. Plus, one never knows when the game has planned your piece's exit, so don't waste your time lying around in bed, he told himself. So the killer found himself walking the busy streets just off campus. As one would imagine, the bars, tattoo parlors, pizza joints, and more bars seemed to dominate the space. But there were others. He found a nice little deli that claimed to make all their own meats, and a smoke shop with all kinds of interesting things for one to enjoy while they were wasting away a day and had nothing else to do. But his favorite had been the rally that was being held on one of the corners of the campus. It hadn't been much when he started. He took his place on a park bench across the street. The killer watched as the enthusiastic young people worked to increase their numbers and helped to make their little part of the world a better place, a safer place. He was intrigued, really, how different they were from him. Not so much in appearance, but in ideology. Why? Was it their environment overall? DNA? Family? Or just the game wanting all the pieces to be just different enough to keep the game fun, interesting? Or was it all of the above? He didn't know. He was just a piece in a bigger game. He could see himself up on the grassy hill with all the young eyes looking up at him in another world, a world where he was not a killer, maybe a wide-eyed, glass always totally full, bunny rabbits and butterflies kind of thinker. But that was a different world. In this world, he had just heard something that took him back a bit. He had to make sure, so he asked a group of young people standing fairly close. "Did he say her name was Amber?" the killer asked the group. "Yeah, she's the senior class president." One of the young people smiled and laughed. The game had just shown him the way. She certainly wasn't his type. She was not Chris, but she was Amber, and that meant something. He watched and listened even more intently now. Clearly, Amber was used to being one of the smartest people in the room. When she spoke, there was a peaceful assurance that the killer actually liked a lot. He could listen to her speak for hours, he thought, even though she was talking about the death penalty for murderers. Not his favorite topic, for sure. But still, there was probably numerous suitors lined up at her sorority door. She had a bright future. How would her peace influence the game? Until he had begun the game, he could not remember meeting, other than maybe one or two Ambers in his whole life. So he did not, more than a second or two, think this was not meant to be. Amber was put in the game for a reason he had only a handful of hours left to figure out. So he settled in, because it did not appear she was going anywhere anytime soon. When the event was over, Nicole Ashley Sweeney, or as her friends knew her, Amber, was ready for a cold beverage and a comfortable chair. She felt like she had stood on the side of the hill for days, when in reality it had only been a couple of hours. Nicole had never thought of herself as Nicole. As soon as high school was over and she was preparing for college, she changed her name to Amber. Amber to her was sophisticated and elegant, but whimsy and fun all at the same time. And that was her. So for the better part of 3 years now, she had answered to Amber Sweeney, a fact that the killer would never know. In turn, Amber, Nicole, would never know her role in the game was determined by a name change, not a legal one. Just a young lady wanting to reinvent herself. As she gathered her light jacket and backpack, her and a small group of friends headed downtown to the first spot they found that looked like it would have accommodations for their party. There they would talk about the event, points they wanted to stress next time, speakers they'd like to get at future events, and just relax and enjoy the fact that the event was over and had gone peacefully. That was not always the case, and they cherished those that did. The killer watched from a distance. He so wanted to walk up and ask the group if they would like some insight from the other side of the table. But not just yet. He still didn't know the game. Better to keep some distance. She was a leader. He could tell. Would she be part of the events being held the following evening? Good question. Quick check, and yes, she was a class president. She'd be introducing the main speaker at approximately 7 p.m. Interesting and good to know. Was this a clue to the game? Part of a bigger move. As he ordered a Coke and a basket of fries, on a whim, he asked the waitress to take the young lady at the other table another of whatever she was drinking. With a smile, the waitress acknowledged then slipped away. He had no idea what she would do. How could he? He'd only begun to study her a short time ago. But he found out pretty quickly. From the left side, he heard, "My friends think my life is worth more than iced tea." He turned around, smiled, used his charm, and spoke. "I'd have to agree with your friends." He stood and they shook hands and introduced themselves, neither using the names they were given at birth. As they took 2 bar stools at a 3-top, the killer thanked her for coming over and explained he had just bought her a drink as a thank you for her speech earlier, that he found delightful, and he was intrigued by her perspective. They were really all he needed to say, and for the next 2 hours, they playfully debated both sides of the criminal system. It was more like a game of light badminton than an aggressive game of tennis. Light on purpose, because the killer wanted it that way. When he thought, even for a second, it could go the other way, he would deflect, give in, or just laugh and change the subject. It was fun for him. Not knowing how this was going to play out, who would live, who would not. It was also fun debating, even for fun, with someone clearly as intelligent and committed as Amber. It would be a shame and a loss if he had to take her from the game. When he realized her friends had gathered around them, he knew it was their way of telling her and him that she was leaving with them and not the stranger eating cold fries and laughing at her bad jokes. He got it. The world was a scary place. So he was the ultimate gentleman. Stood, kissed her hand, and told her he hoped to see her the following evening. Then he watched them scurry off arm in arm without a care in the world. Wrong. Chapter 30. The crowd was building. Maybe more than some thought. Certainly less than others. They had a couple of things going for them. There was nothing else going on in town that night. The weather was good for walking to the stadium, and the news story was so current everyone was still talking about it. The news was only coming out in small details, but the whole world now knew a few things. 1. The killer did not die in the factory parking lot. He had been tied to many, but not all the murders to date, and he was still considered armed, dangerous, and crazy enough to do just about anything next. They had no idea, the killer thought as he watched the people pass his motel window while he listened to the news anchor again talk about the crazed killer on the loose. The idea had come to him in a dream earlier this morning. It was a wonder next to play in the game. He had no idea what the players would do or how if he would live to play another stage or ride off into obscurity. But he was okay with not knowing. This would be a glorious round, and he was ready for it. The night before, he had stopped back by the college campus and entered a side door that was propped open while chairs were being put into place. He wasn't sure why, but he had thought maybe he needed to be proactive. So he had slipped into the first floor restrooms and placed the 2 guns he currently had in his jacket pockets up in the ceiling beneath the ceiling tile, third stall from the left. This afternoon, he was so glad he did. Getting out of the shower, he had thought he had heard there would be metal detectors at the event. That was fine with him. He wanted everyone confident and not as guarded, as he would need to be as close as possible to his new friend. An hour later, he was watching Amber smile, shake hands, and just overall work the room as the crowd filed in. It was a mixed crowd. As expected, the majority were college age, but there was a lot of 20, 30, 40-somethings floating around, he thought. She looked pretty tonight. Nice try, game, but he would not be distracted, so he slowly began to maneuver his way towards the front. The people in the room could feel the same thing. The evening's events were about to begin, if they only knew. As the lights flickered twice, everyone still looking for a seat began to search with more urgency. As the college president took the podium, Amber noticed the killer in the second row, just off to the left of the stage aisle seat, close to the third step that led to the stage. She grinned from ear to ear, and generally seemed to be pleased he was there. Again, nice try, game, but no. He was calm, no sweating, no second thoughts. In retrospect, he had been so ready and so dialed in, he felt like he could take on the crowd, the whole world in that moment. He truly felt powerful, a power only a few would ever know, the power of the weapons in his back pocket, the power of surprise, the power of knowing the future, the power. Amber, on the other hand, was nervous. There were more people than she expected, and now her new boyfriend, Robert, was sitting only 4 seats from the young man she had spent several hours with the previous night, and had felt a connection with. This had never happened to her. It was not good timing. Whatever was going on in her stomach was not butterflies. For the next 40 minutes, the crowd heard from 2 college and 2 local officials about crime and how the college and citizens could play a part in stopping various types of crime around the city. To the killer, it was boring. He just wanted to get to the good parts. But again, he was forced to wait. Finally, after 55 minutes, Amber stood to a warm greeting and approached the podium. Her seat was to the right of the stage, between the president and one of the local officials. There were some armed guards in the back of the room, but they would be too far away to do anything by the time they realized what was going on. Time would be important, however, so he waited. When Amber was done speaking and the crowd began to cheer and clap for Dwayne, he lowered himself and moved around to the front row and through the curtain without anyone even paying any attention to him. From there, he climbed up onto the stage and quickly made his way across to where he guessed Amber's chair would be. As he picked up the bottom of the curtain and looked under, he was 1 chair off, so he moved over, ever so slightly, and then waited again. He could hear Dee begin to speak, and the crowd applauded again. Waited. There would be a moment in the speech that would let him know the time was right. He could feel it. 12 minutes later, Dwayne made the comment, "I would do anything to know why my sister had to die." At that moment, with cat-like skills, the killer slipped underneath the curtain, up behind Amber, with one gun to her temple. Every eye in the room was on him. Amber could not know who was standing behind her until he spoke, and even then, the killer was not sure she knew his voice well enough. Move out to the center of the stage. "Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay. We don't have long to play our game, because police will be here any moment. So, Dee, you will do anything to know why your sister was killed. I'll give you that chance, that opportunity, right now. I'm the killer that everyone seeks. I reached out to you the other day, didn't I, friend? Here's the game. I will tell you why I chose to kill Denise, and then I will kill you, and this young lady will live. Or you can choose to live, and I'll kill her. What happens to me doesn't matter in this game. You have 1 minute, and your time started 15 seconds ago." Then to Amber, "Take a seat." Both guns out now, surveying the room, one always at Amber's head. Not a word from the crowd, but phones were out, recording every second. Good. He was hoping that would happen. Chris would see his finale. The police in the back had pulled their revolvers, but stood motionless. He had caught everyone by surprise. With a shout, 20 seconds! "Don't do this," Amber cried. The killer laughed in Dee's direction and said, "She doesn't have faith you'll do the right thing." 10 seconds. "Please," Dwayne shouted. 5. "I am truly sorry. I can't do it. I have a family. I don't know this girl. I can't give my life and leave my poor family with so many questions after just losing my poor sister." "Then we have all heard your answer." 1 shot to the back of the head, and then, just like he came, he was gone under the curtain, out into the darkness of the back of the stage. If not for hundreds of phones capturing every second, no one could have believed what just happened in that minute. Actually less. It was not even what movies were made of, but it happened, and while the many in the crowd just sat stunned, some sprang to action. There was no saving the young woman, but some wanted the young man that had just shot her in cold blood. The killer was on the move, and because of his planning ahead, he knew exactly where he was going. The night before, after he had placed the guns in the ceiling and finding himself with no one else around, he walked around and made himself familiar with the space and an escape plan. He was halfway up the wall-mounted ladder when he heard the first voices. There was no way they could see him, and he waited until they passed, opened the hatch in the ceiling, and then he slipped out onto the roof, across, and then a short jump, and then down a fire escape, and he was walking with his backpack down an empty alley. The blood was an issue, so he was walking slowly, wiping the blood with a motel towel and pulling out the extra shirt, pulling it over his head. He had to be quick. He was on a tight schedule. The motorcycle was exactly where he left it, full of fuel and ready for his trip north. The killer had every intention of trying to eventually make it to Alaska. He had heard great things about the state. A man could reinvent himself there, get lost in the vast wilderness. That sounded good to him right now. Would the police be looking for their killer headed up the interstate on a motorcycle? Or at the train station? Airport? He didn't know, to be honest. He just felt like it was the right path for him in this situation. As he pulled out into traffic, he could feel any stress that had been there wash away, as a realization that his crazy plan was going to work, and again he'd won the game. And now he was officially retiring, a decision he had made in that exact moment. The night air felt good. He felt great. He was free. The decision was made. All he had to do was find the first rest stop, take off the fake tats he had been wearing for the last few days. The one on his neck were driving him especially crazy. Throw the wig in the trash, shave for the first time in days, and he would be back to his old self. The man everyone in LA knew as Brad. They didn't know him. They really didn't know him at all. He was up to 70 miles an hour before he knew it, and quickly back down. He didn't need to get a speeding ticket for several reasons. As he looked down to see the speedometer fall below 40, he looked back up just in time to see a mother and her children trying to cross the road in front of him. Not too far, but still had plenty of room. It appeared to him the woman and 4 children would easily make it across the 4-lane road before his bike made it to the crosswalk. So he only slightly let off the throttle. That is when one of the young children's hats flew off in the breeze, and the young child turned and headed back straight into his path of the oncoming bike. In a split second, the killer had a decision to make. Hit the child, hit the mom, who had just stepped back out into the road as well, or go into the other 2 lanes that now had traffic coming his direction. A split second. Hero or murderer? The game again. As the killer lay on the pavement, he knew someone was trying to gently remove his helmet. He knew it was bad. He could feel nothing. Nothing. But he could see the concern on the faces of those around him. He was the hero, if only until they found out who it truly was. He had decided to save the child and her mother. He had tried to lessen the impact of the hit, but he wasn't sure what happened in that last few seconds. All he knew was he wasn't going to make it, and he was okay with that. It was the game. When the helmet was removed, he began to whisper. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak in a full voice, but he needed to be heard. Finally, a man came close enough to hear his final words. My God-given name is Stuart Melvin Scott III. And then his game was over. Chapter 31. The protesters were out in force. It was winter, and the cold temperatures did not stop the crowds from gathering. It was another example of something that split the country. You were either on one side or the other. Very few had no opinion. The movie was called Be Careful What You Wish For, from a director who was up and coming, and he was out of the Midwest. It was the story of the serial killer, Stuart Melvin Scott III. There were the camps that said, it's just a movie, don't be so sensitive. And then, of course, there were those that thought the movie glorified the killer. It would call others to become mass murderers. The families of those that were killed, those that were forced to play the game, and even the killer's family all tried to block the making of the film. Actors bailed on the project because of pressure, but in the end, the film was made and was expected to do very well. Marcus would not be watching the film. He had heard about it. He was on the side of those who believed the movie should not be made, but for selfish reasons. He was alone, a ward of the state of Virginia, an invalid that needed round-the-clock care. Samantha had not tried to contact him, and the only thing he knew that she had moved and had changed her name. Stuart's family had a hard time after the news broke. His mother and father both had lost their jobs and couldn't get state assistance. They sold everything, moved in with other relatives that would take them in from time to time, tried to get on jobs, used fake names when they could. Every time they were found out, and the whole thing would start over again. The last anyone knew, they were staying in an old camper without running water or electricity in the backwoods on a distant relative's farm somewhere in the Midwest. Struggling would have been too kind of a word to describe their situation. The killer was cremated, and his ashes were placed in an undisclosed location. Authorities were concerned they would be defaced or stolen. In the end, the movie was a huge success. The family did not make a cent off the profits. No future serial killer claimed to be created due to the actions of Stuart. And the young girl that was crossing the street? Well, her name is Becky, and she is now 14 and a half. Becky also was asked to play herself in the movie, and after much discussion, her mom allowed her to do so. With the money, her and her sister's future college plans were taken care of, and the family has a new house. She is doing well and is well grounded. Becky is kind of shy and didn't agree to too many interviews, but when she did, and when she was asked about her thoughts regarding the killer and all the evil things he did, and the one good thing he did, she really could only tell the truth, like her mom had always taught her. So, her answer was always the same. I'm glad Stuart Melvin Scott III died doing good. The end. So not so short of an episode, but I did promise it would be eventful, and I think it was. When you're writing a novel, you can go a lot of different directions. This felt right for me and for the book, and I hope you agreed. If not, I am sorry, but I hope you enjoyed the book overall, and I hope you'll look forward to our next journey together, which will be Defender of Children 2, coming soon. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.